Dr. Bharat Gupta is an eminent scholar, an educator, a thinker, a published author, a sitar and surbahar player, a musicologist, classicist, and a theatre theorist. He's currently a trustee and executive member of Indira Gandhi National Center of the Arts in Delhi and presents lectures and speaks at different forums all over the world. He's a scholar of Sanskrit, Greek, Hindi, and English texts. I really cannot wait to hear him, and all I can say is that I am very blessed just to be in his presence. So Bharatji, over to you.
Go ahead, just start.
Should I?
Yes, yes.
Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha. Well, friends, I'm extremely delighted to be with you here for several reasons. But the main reason is that this is an Indic book club function. I have been for the last nearly 2 years trying to play my small role in the establishment and in the flowering of Indian Book Club and assist Harikiran Vadlamani ji. And I have arranged for many events in Delhi and elsewhere. So it gives me a very special, more than pleasure. It gives me almost a pride that I am here giving the first talk in the Chicago chapter. Now, coming to my subject, it is the unity of the three Shastras. Now, before I go on to talk about the unity of these three Shastras, which are the Artha Shastra, Kama Shastra, and the Natya Shastra. You know, these are three very famous texts in the Indian tradition. Artha Shastra of KAUTILYA and Kama Shastra of VATSYAYAN, the primary first text, and then Natya Shastra of Bharat. Before I go on to talk about the unity and of these three texts, let me say a few words about Shastra. See, because the very notion of Shastra is something which for almost 100 years, or more than 150 years almost, ever since the arrival of the British in India and outside India, has become a negative one. Shastras are considered old books talking about something in the distant past, not relevant today. Now, this has been the dominant discourse thanks to Jawaharlal Nehru and the whole system that he initiated. But this is also the dominant discourse, let us say, in Western academia. The crux of this discourse is that Shastras are only prescriptive. They tell you, do this, don't do this. So they are meant to regulate your life. They are meant to completely, not just regulate, completely control it. And in this way, they are a damaging influence. You see, this is the final message. In fact, the clear message that comes around. So the first thing that I would like to say against this kind of a notion, and here in North America, Chicago is the city from which this notion is greatly propagated, by Wendy Doniger and Sheldon Pollock and the Chicago University Indology School. The idea that Shastra is written by people who have no understanding of our modern day lives. So they are written by a class of people called as Brahmin long time back, and their intentions were not very good. And so we have to come out of the stranglehold of Shastra. Now, if this is the thrust of the discourse, then how do you make the very concept of Shastra credible once again here in North America and in India? Of course, in India we have a whole set of people, that is our saints and acharyas and people who belong to the religious institutions, who have a very different view of it, who revere it. But then, there is nothing in between. There is nothing in between a disregard and a subversion, and on the other hand, of the reverence which is promoted. So, of course, there are very great speakers who will tell you how Shastra is very important in India, and you can listen to some of their discourses and some of their arguments, but somehow they are unable to reach the common man, the common user. So, with this great gap, where do you go? My effort has been to tell people that, look, Shastras belong to a certain discipline. What is a Shastra? Shastram iti shasanopayam. A Shastra is a method of, it is a upaya, an instrument, shasanopayam, of shasan, that is, of making a discipline. Here shasan doesn't mean administration or the executive body, but it means the discipline of that particular given subject. So a Shastra is meant for one subject. Now this is very different from what we all the time hear. Some of the great saints and speakers will say, "Hamare Shastron mein aisa kaha hai." They always talk about Shastras in plural. Now that is where the problem lies. Because a Shastra is not to be treated in plural. What is said in one Shastra is relevant for that discipline. So if Manu said in Manusmriti, in the context of education, Kamajo Dashako Ganaha, that is, there are 10 things which arouse irresponsible desires and which are not good for a brahmachari who is studying, then that is relevant for that particular situation and for that particular injunction. It is not applicable to every aspect of life. But what we do is, because we don't know the method of studying a Shastra, the purpose of a Shastra, we just pick a line from here, pick a line from another place, and try to make an argument on the basis of it. So this is the problem both in India and outside India here, in spite of some very fine Sanskritis, some so-called Sanskritis, the tactic of just picking up a line from somewhere and contrasting it with another line and then trying to make an argument, that is being practiced here by serious academics also. So the first thing to note is that a Shastra is for a given subject. So Artha Shastra, for instance, is for making the state. Artha doesn't mean just money, but it means the state in which money, or rather prosperity, would be generated. And so how to establish a state, how to govern a state, that is Arthashastra. And the Arthashastra has a limitation. Your answer to every solution is not in the Arthashastra. Similarly, Kamashastra is about erotic pleasure or about sexuality between lovers, whether they are married lovers or unmarried lovers, or as it was the common thing in ancient India, between a customer and a courtesan. But it has to be consensual, pleasurable sex. That is the region of Kamashastra VATSYAYAN. So every kind of sexuality or a discussion on various kinds of sexual behavior is not the subject of Arthashastra, the Kamashastra. And therefore it should not be held either responsible, or one should not look for it, a deep psychological analysis or some sociological implication, because that is not mentioned there, that was not the problem. Natya Shastra is for production of plays on the stage. And Natya Shastra is the discipline, the Shasanopayam, for how to produce good plays. And what is the purpose of those plays? Why do we produce plays? Is it just for entertainment? Is it for something higher than entertainment? But whatever is being said is in the context of plays and the arts which are part of dramatic production. So music becomes part of dramatic production, therefore it is also the Shastra for music. It is also the Shastra for some other kind of science, or which later on developed into Murti, Kala, etc. The important thing therefore is to note that these are very rigorous disciplines. Now you will ask me the question, why have I taken these three and talked about the unity of these three only? Now, my answer to it. You see, since the 19th century, when we came into a collision or a confrontation with the Europeans, in our case with the British, we underwent a great process of rethinking about ourselves. This had not happened so much in the 700 or 800 years before that, because our confrontation or reaction to Islam was not that interactive. Islam provides very little room for dialogue. And the way it came into India was without any possibility of dialogue. The whole history of Islam is that way. And it has to be seen that way. And you should tell your children about all the books that are being written regarding the so-called contributions of Islam, that they are not contributions of Islam, but they are contributions of either West Asian culture from Turkmenistan or from Turkey or from other, and they are not essentially Islamic things, like most of the painting that flourished during the time has a Chinese content. You know, the art forms are different. It has nothing to do with the religion proper, because it was not inspired by any principle of Islam. Anyway, this was a side comment. Coming to the main thing, the British, they created an intellectual identity crisis for the Indians, for the thinking Indians. And in order to resolve that, Indians took the easy path. The easy path was, well, we are not that different from you. What you call good exists here also. So if you are monotheist, that is, if you believe in one God, monos means one, and theos is God, so we are also monotheists. And behind this so-called polytheism about which you very rightly complain, there is only one supreme Brahma. And so we went into a kind of a thought where we tried to create an Indian version of what was being given to us as the ideal of life, as the ideal of what is good, what is human, what is beautiful, what is spiritual. And we had certain movements like the Arya Samaj. If you read Swami Dayanand's translation of the Vedas, then Indra is also translated into Param Pita Paramatma. Ushan is also translated. All the Devi Devatas, the Hindi translation will just give you Param Pita Paramatma. So that is the Param Pita Paramatma exists only in the Christian world. He doesn't exist in the Hindu world. In the Hindu world there are so many gods and goddesses and lesser gods and greater gods, and there is a whole variety. Arya Samaj, great in some respect, and it encouraged education of women, etc., but theologically created this problem. Similarly, we had Brahmo Samaj. We had all these Samajes where, now it's very carefully to be thought about, where Nirguna Brahma became the ideal, and paths leading to the worship of Nirguna Brahma became the preferable, the higher paths, and all kinds of Saguna Upasana, that is all kind of worship of God as Devi, Devata, Murti, temple became a lower form of worship, full of all kinds of rituals which were not to be followed, which were an exterior reality, which were not the best way of doing things. Now this discourse, this reformist discourse, continued in India for a very long time. But fortunately, this was the discourse of the intellectuals. This was not the discourse of the people. The people continued what they were doing. They continued to go to the temple, they continued with the same ritual, they continued in the same worship, and all that was the real, actual karma, activity that was preserved. So fortunately, Arya Samaj, Brahmo Samaj, reformist movements, including even to some extent the movement of Swami Vivekananda, it was not able to percolate very deeply and extensively in the whole of India. So we continued, and we do continue, with what is derogatorily called Karma Kand. As a matter of fact, the whole spirit of Hindu practice, culture, philosophy is in Karma Kand. It is in this. Now, as a result of this thinking, we also developed a preference for the Nirguna philosophical texts. So the Upanishads became more elevated. Vedanta became the highest peak of realization. and Vedantic practice became the preferred practices. See, this is the social reformist movement, and which to a very great extent continues in some areas. But the practice of the people was contrary to it, and it preserved what was being done for a long time. Why was it so? Why is it that Hinduism was not able to reform itself as the 19th century or the earliest 20th century reformists would have wanted to do? Because one of the most essential practices and methods of realization in the whole of Indian culture is that whatever we do, it has to be done manasa, vacha and karma. By the mind, by the speech and by the bodily action together. You cannot do one at a time, because all the five senses, they really work together when you do manasa, vacha, karma. And this has been the whole system of cultural expression, cultural sadhana, cultural realization throughout the Indian system. Whether in the sphere of spiritual search or in the sphere of any other activity which could be called as a worldly activity. That whatever is to be done manasa, vacha, karma. The 19th century was a period when the classical texts of India were being rendered into print from manuscripts or from oral memory of the Pandits. Now, those who created the print culture were British, and these people had a preference. They were more interested in philosophy and literature, because they were raised on the idea of what is classical, in classical Greek and Roman terms. So they said, okay, what are your philosophical, religious texts? What is your religion? So then they would take to the Rig Veda, Upanishad, and Brahmanas come later. They did not go that deeply into them. And all these texts were translated. Texts which were not related to a religious or philosophical search were kind of left behind. They existed as manuscripts, but quote unquote, they were not discovered. See, because people were not looking for them. It is in the end of the quarter of the 20th century, first quarter of the 20th century, that texts like Artha Shastra, Natya Shastra and Kam Shastra were put into print and propagated. So we had almost more than a century of pursuit in philosophic and religious texts, not in the worldly texts, not in the making of the texts which were concerned of making India a civilization. A civilization doesn't come into existence just by religious belief or by spiritual practices. There has to be every kind of excellence, from how to make a house or how to dig a grave or make a shmashan, right? Even each and every aspect of technology has to be perfected in order to make a complete civilization. So there was a bias about religious and philosophical texts. These texts, they come much later. Therefore, in the whole study of Indian texts, whether in the East or in the West, there is a schizophrenia. The so-called secular texts secular Shastras, they came to be studied much later. But this was all against the whole spirit of Indian civilization. Why? Now you all know that the most important classical values of culture in India are based on the four Varnas, Brahma, Kshatriya, Vaishya and Shudra, the four stages of life, Brahmacharya, Grihastha, Vanaprastha and Sannyas, and other than the Varna and the Ashram, the division again into four Purusharthas. That is Dharma, Artha, Kam and Moksha. Earlier, the division was only into three. The three Vedas, the three ashramas and the three Vargas or the three Purusharthas. So Dharma, Artha and Kam. Why do you live? What do you live for? Whether it is philosophy, whether it is art, whether it is production, whether it is sexuality, whether it is producing something, trading, what is the aim of life? Where do you get that answer? Where do you get a statement of value about this? You get this in the concept of Purusharthas. What does the Purush? Now Purush here stands for male and female, and for the third category also, because in India the Tritiya Prakriti, the homoerotic, which has just been discovered by the West in last 20 years, was a natural thing. So Purusharthas are for everybody. What is the meaning of life? And the meaning of life is divided into Dharma, Artha and Kam. And then the highest purpose of all these three is moksha, in the sense that when there is a fulfillment of Dharma, then there is moksha. When there is a fulfillment of Kama, then there is moksha. When there is a fulfillment of Artha, then there is moksha. The idea is not that moksha is not salvation, that I shall achieve it after death, I will go to heaven or to hell. Now that is not the soteriology of the Hindu system or the Indian system. I get it here and now. Whatever reward, because whatever I do each and every minute is a karma, and that is a karma which will get accumulated for my future personality. See, what is the doctrine of karma? That it is something which is constantly going on in time. The Indian system of action and result is not spread out in one life or a certain number of 20 lives or 200 lives. It is spread out, as a matter of fact, in every split second and in eternity. So when you are out of karma, then you have moksha. Therefore, dharma, artha and kam, they are to be practiced together and at the same time. It is not that I will practice kama for a certain period of my life, or that I shall practice artha. Now you see, these are some of the contemporary distortion. I shall first make a career, I'll get established, I'll halfway pay through my mortgage, and then I will turn to higher things. Now this never happens. And this can never happen. Because the idea of kama and artha and dharma, they have to be handled and practiced and executed together. They all three come together. Again, some of our Western Indologists have a very great problem with this, that they can be practiced together. And just day before yesterday, that is myself and Sunthar, my friend, we chanced upon this book, Against Dharma. The book is Against Dharma. Dharma ke virodh mein. The book is titled Against Dharma. And of course, who else can write it other than the greatest of American Indologists, Wendy Doniger. So she has written this book. Now I want to read out to you the message of this book, and because I don't really like to be accused of distortion, and I believe in the very traditional Indian system of Purva Paksha, so I'll give her the Purva Paksha in her own words, in the quotation. So the purpose for writing this book is, my argument is that these texts, two texts, which is, she has taken not the Natya Shastra, but the Artha Shastra and the Kama Shastra. Thank God she has not reached the Natya Shastra. Our most beautiful things would have been demolished. These two texts, ideologically closely related, advocate blatant transgressions against dharma. So, Artha Shastra is against dharma. Ideologically closely related, advocate blatant transgressions against dharma. Though both texts developed mechanisms to allow them to pay superficially lip service to dharma. So Artha Shastra and Kam Shastra pay lip service to dharma, but actually they want to subvert dharma, they are against dharma. They are evidence of a steady stream of subversive ideas. Now, subversive is the most beautiful word for Wendy Doniger and people over her school. They are evidence of a steady stream of subversive ideas that are maintained by certain Brahmins in the face of the disapproval of other Brahmins. So there are two kinds of Brahmins, according to her. Those who are maintaining the text of Dharma, which is Dharma Shastras like Manusmriti, Yagyaval Smriti, Apastamba Sutra, Hadithika, etc. They are one category of Brahmins, and the other Brahmins, that is VATSYAYAN and KAUTILYA, maintained by certain Brahmins in the face of the disapproval of other Brahmins. This undermining of the dominant social and religious order by secular scientific disciplines was continued in the most ingenious way. She goes on to say some other things. Now, so first of all, she presumes that all texts are written by Brahmins. Now, Artha Shastra was written by Kautilya Vishnugupta, who was perhaps a Brahmin. We know, we believe that. But Kama Shastra was written by VATSYAYAN, and VATSYAYAN is never called a Brahmin. I mean, I would like to challenge Wendy Doniger at this forum to give me a single line of quotation from any classical text which categorizes VATSYAYAN as a Brahmin. You see, we have category of Muni. Those who attain the level of being the child of Brahma. Those who have done such great and high level of thinking, manana, they become Munis. So VATSYAYAN, I think, has been called Acharya and perhaps Muni also, but never a Brahmin. Secondly, the other text, which he mentions, which is the text, Vishnugupta's text, this may have been written down by a Brahmin, but then how can you have a whole order of governance without contributions of Kshatriyas in it? And many people will not believe that Manu was not a Brahmin. Manu was a king, and kings are supposed to be Kshatriyas. So I don't understand how this categorization of some Brahmins subverting some other Brahmins is here. In other words, Wendy Doniger starts with a presumption that there is a radical division between the Trivarga or the three ideals of life. The Purusharthas of Indian classical thought are ruptured. They are not Purusharthas. They are not a unity. So this is the whole book, and of course I read through some parts of the book, and I'll read more and hopefully write if I get time, write a total demolition of this text. But it appears to me that this is a politically forced thinking, that Dharma Shastra is kept on one high level and the two secular Shastras, scientific secular, as she says, Shastra, are juxtaposed as enemies of that. Now this is total falsehood. If you want to have a concept of Purusharthas, it can only be a concept of unity. Otherwise, what you mean is that the ancient Hindu civilization was a schizophrenic civilization. Now, of course, Wendy Doniger means that, and her book, The Hindu and the Hindus, propagates that. You can read one of my criticisms where I exactly mentioned that she is constantly talking about conflict between the practices and ideas of Hinduism. So on one side you have the bhogi, on the other side you have the yogi, on one side you have the dharmatma, on the other side you have the indulgent. So there is Yayati as indulgent, and there is a Buddha as the... So she is constantly working in these disunities. We have to understand that all the so-called secular texts of India are not secular, they are sacred. Sacred. Sex is sacred. It's not sacred the way Wendy Doniger makes it, or some other people make Tantra to be sacred. But it is sacred in the sense that it is a stepping stone to a higher pursuit. And the body is neither ugly nor sinful. And if the body is not sinful, and if man is not born in sin, because the devil gave the apple to Eve and we are all born in sin according to the Christian and the Judaic notion, if we are not there, then we are divine. The body is as much divine as anything else. Because the Creator has made the creation, and the creation is not different from the Creator. And the Creator has complete control over creation. It is neither different, it's very important to understand, from the Creator, nor uncontrolled by the Creator. In the Christian theological system, Lucifer is not controlled by God anymore. He has to stay somewhere in hell eternally. But in the Indian system, Ravan will not go to hell. Even Ravan will go to Vaikuntha because he came in touch with Rama. Because there is only one reality. And once he has completed the cycle of his karma, he is as much entitled to moksha or Vaikuntha as is the holiest of the holy other person, like let us say one of the munis for whom, all the munis for whom Rama went into the forest. Because the creation is as beautiful. And if creation is as beautiful, if Artha is as beautiful, if this world is as beautiful, if my desires are as beautiful as the desires of the munis or the higher desires, then in that case there can be no contradiction between a secular Shastra and a Dharma Shastra. See, it stands to reason. I fail to understand what sort of logic these people are pursuing. The Donigerite logic, I don't understand. It's not theologically tenable in the Indian system. If creation, what is created by God, is controlled by God, is part of God, is God, then how can it contradict God? How can then Kama contradict Dharma? How can Artha contradict Dharma? Throughout this book, she talks of certain bad conducts, machinations that Artha Shastra prescribes to win over the enemy. And she says that, look, he is prescribing a dharma. Now, dharma is not a set of rules. The set of conduct, the prescribed conduct for somebody, or a set of rules for somebody in a particular stage of life is not dharma. That is only a way of achieving dharma. I give you a simple example. A brahmachari or a sannyasi is not supposed to embrace and kiss and have sexual intercourse with women. Alright? He's not even supposed to look at them or touch them. But suppose if a sannyasi standing on the bank of a river sees a drowning woman, then should he not jump into the water and pull her out? Should he just say, oh, the rule is, don't touch a woman, don't see a woman? It will be silly. So what is dharma then? The dharma in that particular given situation is to catch hold of the woman and pull her out and save her life. That is dharma there and then. Dharma will come into action. Dharma will be protected if you do this, not if you follow a certain commandment or a certain rule. So to say that certain prescriptions of Artha Shastra are against dharma is sheer lack of insight into both dharma and Dharma. So if in some place, if KAUTILYA says that you should attack the enemy when he is weakest or when he is in trouble and wipe him out, what is wrong with it? Because you are at war. That is the dharma of the warrior, the requirement of that particular time. You are not supposed to follow those rules of conduct which you would in peace. Now, this is one of the fundamental misunderstandings, not only of Mrs. Doniger, but of a large number of people who approach the Indian text. They do not understand what is prescribed for which moment, and where, and for whom. Because if life is a unity, then it has to be practiced as a unity. So, now what is Artha Shastra? The first, the very first line of Artha Shastra is, it summarizes, it summarizes the whole of Artha Shastra. Anvikshiki, Trayi, Varta, Dandaniti, Cha iti Vidya. What is the Vidya? What is the art? What is the knowledge? Knowledge particular to the Shastra. What does the Shastra consist of? 4 things. Anvikshiki, capacity to analyze. Trayi, the 3 Vedas. Anvikshiki, Trayi, Varta. Varta in classical Sanskrit meant not dialogue but business, commerce. Anvikshiki, Trayi, Varta, Dandaniti. That is the penal code. The civil penal code and the criminal penal code. If these 4 things are in a proper balance, then you have Artha Shastra or Artha. Artha will come because of this. The rest is detailed. The whole book, the whole set of shlokas is detailed about these 4, how they are to be implemented by the king, by the scholars, by the various sections, how do you make the state, how much would be taxation, how much would be control, whom will you punish, how much punishment you would give. All that detail follows from here. That these 4 things, Anvikshiki, Trayi, Varata and Dandariti should be in a balance. This is Artha Shastra. Kama Shastra. The most important line in Kama Shastra is, I don't remember it now today. The purpose is, he says that there are 3 Purusharthas, Dharma, Kama and Artha. He says whenever you practice one, whenever you are pursuing one, you must be careful to see that the other 2 are not harmed or forgotten or left behind. So, he prescribes under certain conditions how to seduce your neighbor's wife. Kama Shastra does that. But he gives the conditions. Who can be the wife? And how that act becomes a dharmic act. And it is not against dharma. And it is not against artha. He prescribes it because there are certain very odd, peculiar conditions in life. You see, life is not so simple that it will flow according to just 5 commandments or 10 commandments. Life is far more complex. And action in every given situation has to be seen. And action is suggested to you by the Shastra of the field which you are going to practice at that given moment. So, the crux of Kama Shastra is that you should fulfill your desires, but how, where, when, and not causing any harm to either to yourself or to others. As long as you don't do it and you follow the dharmic concept of life. You follow the Chaturashram, you follow the 3 ashramas, you follow the 3 vargas, and you succeed as a good citizen. So Kama Shastra would then prescribe how to pursue pleasure, how to be the man of the city, how to go and gamble, up to what degree, where, when, how to go to the courtesan's house. But you should properly pay her. You should not try to cheat her. And the king should protect those. Both Artha Shastra and Kama Shastra prescribe that the courtesans are entirely protected by the state. They also pay their taxes. The Kama Shastra prescribes that the so-called homoerotics and homoeroticism, which has become a great problem in the West now, it has brought gender thinking into a crisis. People don't know whether they are women or they are men, or they are women in the later half of the day or in the former half of the day. They are so confused. The Kama Shastra gives a very clear injunction that they are natural beings. Dvidha tritiya prakriti. The third prakriti, the third nature, that is one who is neither man nor woman. Tritiya prakriti, dvidha, is of two kinds. Purusharupini, Strirupini. That is, those who are homoerotic, they are either tending to be male in their behavior or female, active or passive, right? And then there is a whole description on what they should be, and the Artha Shastra describes what are their rights and where they should live, and they will not be paying any taxes. And there is a complicated system which you should study, and you will find that the problem which is plaguing particularly the modern West had been, if not solved, dealt with very deftly earlier. Natya Shastra. It is the biggest of all the Shastras, 6,000 verses. But for today, the most important quotation from Natya Shastra would be, Nahi rasadrite kaschid artha pravartate. Without a rasa, nahi rasadrite, without rasa, in the absence of rasa, kaschid artha pravartate. There is no fulfillment, there is no purpose served, there is no sense in anything unless there is a rasa in it. So if you find me boring, you will walk out. There has to be rasa. You will not eat if your food is not delightful. You will not watch a play or a film or a painting unless it gives you aesthetic pleasure. So rasa is the ultimate aim of all arts, Natya in particular. But because Natya is one art in which all other arts are present somewhere or the other. If you want to be a great speaker and pronounce words correctly, you have to learn this in theatre. That's where they teach you how to pronounce correctly, to render it correctly, to speak and to speak at a distance. Everything is taught there. If you want to dance, then again theatre. If you want to paint, if you want to make good clothes, everything. So Natya Shastra therefore makes life full of rasa. Artha Shastra provides you the security of a state, security of an empire, security of a polis. Nagari, Nagar, you become a citizen, a sophisticated citizen. The Kama Shastra is constantly using the word Nagar, one who knows how to live with taste, one who knows how to fulfill his desires with taste and within limits. So that is Artha Shastra, Kama Shastra and Natya Shastra. What will be the pleasures? But is Natya only for pleasure? No. It is for making you understand the values of 3 Purusharthas and 4 Purusharthas. It is for instruction as much. When Brahma gave the Natya Shastra to Bharat Muni, then he said that this is going to teach the best of values to the people. And you know, in India, all the Vedas, all the Shastras, all the message and the philosophy has been preserved not by Pandits of those Shastras, but by performers. all the Puranas, when they were enacted, when they were brought forth before us as Leela, राम की लीला देखकर आप राम तक पहुंचते हैं, वाल्मीकि को या तुलसी को पढ़कर नहीं पहुंचते। वो आप बाद में पढ़ते हैं कि तुलसीदास गोस्वामी ने क्या लिखा है, पहले तो आप लीला, राम लीला देखते हैं। And when you see the Leela enacted on the stage at all levels, whether it is done most beautifully, let us say in Kudiyatam, or it is done as Swang in Haryana, then you know what is Leela. So it's Ram Leela or Krishna Leela, it is Mahabharata or Ramayana which has preserved the rest of the philosophical understanding of India. So there is a complete unity. There is nothing against dharma in India. It is only those who understand neither in